Hello my friends.
We are infinitely grateful
that we have another opportunity to see you all again.
Before we begin, I want to thank each and every one of you for the great support. I'm doing alright. Unfortunately, there are no more completely safe places in Ukraine, but my family and I are in relative safety. I'm still unable to return home. I have extremely limited technical ability to create videos, but I will not give up. Dear friends, I appreciate your concern and sympathy.
Okay guys, I can't wait to move on to the main topic of the video and reveal an important character on our team.
You're as impatient as ever, Dora. And today, for the first time in history, we are pleased to introduce you to Chris.
Hey everyone, I'm Chris. I'm excited to be here helping out our bot buddy with the video.
Yes, this is exactly the guy we thank at the end of each video. Over the years, he has provided invaluable assistance and support to the channel. Chris, we are so happy to have you join us as our host.
And I'm super excited and happy to be here giving our viewers some more Hearthstone news and some math.
So let's get started. Today we will try to measure power creep in Hearthstone.
So to do this, we did something a bit interesting. We are actually trying to recreate the value of modern effects by comparing them to mechanics mostly used in classic cards.
Despite the fact that classic and modern Hearthstone have a lot in common, they are two completely different games.
Initially, Hearthstone had only two main card types, minions and spells. Minions on their own have always had low value. The real juice, the real meat and cheese comes when you combine the bodies of these minions, their raw stats, with keywords or special effects. This leads to more utility, which eventually leads to the emergence of full-fledged synergies between cards. Over time, spells, minions, and other special effects began to combine into unexpectedly powerful mechanics. Typically in classic Hearthstone, effects and mana costs were in a very particular balance. The cheaper the card, the less benefit you could get overall. If the card had an effect, stats were reduced. The stronger the effect, the less stats that a minion had. The more expensive a card was, the more value you could get, and vice versa for cheaper. In addition, the amount of resources that could be used in any given turn was severely limited. Classic Hearthstone relied on a very clear structure of rules and restrictions. In modern Hearthstone, there are no limits and absolutely everything is possible due to uncontrolled and a lot of times unbalanced effects. I don't know if the developers are using some kind of modern hidden benchmark to balance their effects, mechanics, stats, cost, etc., but this question was haunting us, so we decided to try to create our own simple way to determine maximum value of cards.
As test subjects, we decided to choose the most popular standard format legendary cards. We will break down each effect into components and try to find similar interactions among classic Hearthstone cards, and if this is not possible, then among the cards of the subsequent expansions.
In other words, we will try to recreate the effect using a chain of old Hearthstone cards. This will allow us to estimate the real cost of the effects in total mana crystals.
As a result, we will determine the maximum value of the card in the case of a full implementation of its effect, as well as the utility ratio.
You should not take our method too seriously, it's just an experiment that ignores some factors. But despite its imperfections, it does a good job of demonstrating just how prominent power creep has become.
Let's start our review with the simplest card. Mankrik is both a summoner, summons a minion, and a damage dealer, and he himself is a minion, although he does have a far delayed summoning action. By himself, Mankrik costs 3 mana and has 3 foreign stats. By classic standards, these stats are worth about 3.5 mana. Mankrik, like most classic Hearthstone minions, has an additional effect. He summons another minion with 3/7 in stats, meaning you get another minion that's worth around 5 mana, and you get the additional effect of dealing 3 damage, which works just like the classic 1 mana spell, Sinister Strike.
We believe that every component is important to determine this card's benefit, since modern cards have the property of summing effects. Moreover, we believe that each effect has an additional cost. Why do we think so? Everything is very simple. In classic Hearthstone, every action had a certain cost, and your resources were severely limited. Habitual actions for modern Hearthstone required playing a series of cards from your hand in Classic, which means wasting resources.
Stacking the effects of cards in one card creates an additional benefit, since you need to play fewer cards from your hand to achieve a goal. In these calculations, we valued each added effect as an additional mana crystal.
So let's move on to some results. The maximum value for Mankrik is 3.5 mana for his body, 5 due to his summoned minion, 1 for damage you do to the opponent, and 2 more mana for combining all of these effects. Thus, for only 3 mana, you will get Mankrik's maximum value of over 11 mana crystals. The most important indicator here is his utility ratio, which shows how much more benefit you get from playing the card if everything is actually utilized. So if you get the summon, if you deal the damage, etc., etc. The utility ratio for Mankrik is 3.8 according to our calculations, which means that for just 3 mana, you can potentially get almost 4 times the benefit of this card from the value. It's insane.
Next on the list is Mutanus. This card is a resource destroyer. The effect is activated instantly and the Mutanus body is capable of self-improvement. Eat one of your opponent's cards. What could be easier? But it's actually one of the most unique and complex effects in the game.
Of course, some cards allow us to destroy cards in the opponent's deck, but destroying a card from the opponent's hand has much more value. If we had to repeat this effect using other Hearthstone cards, we would have to play a whole chain of cards. First, the battle cry of Dirty Rat, then Silence, an improved version of Faceless Manipulator battle cry, to add the stats, and finally Assassinate to destroy the enemy target.
We didn't know how to rate the battle cry of Dirty Rat. How much would a spell cost that can play a creature from the opponent's hand? Dirty Rat has too high of a value, which makes it really difficult to determine. In the end, we couldn't think of anything better than estimating this effect at 1 mana. Faceless Manipulator was a bit easier. We ignored the body, as it has no value when copying another minion. Mutanus doesn't just copy stats, it adds opponent's stats to its own, which makes it significantly better in a lot of ways than Faceless Manipulator, but at the same time, it doesn't copy the creature's other properties, which is a bit worse. So in the end, we decided to evaluate the effect at 4 mana.
As a result, for 7 mana you are able to get a value of 18 mana crystals, and therefore 2.6 times the benefit.
Next in line is Drekthar in his best form. This is a summoner with combo potential, but for the activation effect, you must build the deck according to special rules.
Summoning 2 minions from your deck is different than a normal summon. Drekthar's effect can be thought of as using 2 copies of Farsight to pull minions and immediately play them. Thus, this effect is equivalent to 12 mana crystals, which means that for 4 mana, you get 3 times the value. But most importantly, you can always get this value if you have at least 2 minions left in your deck. Moreover, the card has combo potential, which means that by using additional mana crystals and resources, you can multiply the benefit this card gives you if it's in specific decks. This is perhaps one of the most poorly balanced cards in the history of the game. Trust me.
After the nerf, this card lost its luster. Summoning 1 minion from the deck plus the Drekthar body is equivalent to 8 mana crystals. Just an interesting fact, the Eye of Drekthar is in Farsight's card art.
Before we continue, we'd like to hear your thoughts on our approach. Does our method deserve a separate section on the channel in which we will consider cards from each set from classic to current expansions?
If yes, please like this video or share your impressions in the comments. We understand that the method is not scientific, but finding similar effects among the old mechanics seems quite fascinating to us. Each card is like a puzzle.
Let's continue with Mr. Smite. This guy is a damage dealer, and he's got charge. That's great. The card's other main feature is that it has an aura, which has an immediate effect and it lasts long term, so there's combo potential. Mr. Smite is basically Tundra Rhino, but on steroids, and he's a pirate. We don't necessarily know how to rate the effect of an aura, but Tundra Rhino has stats that fit into a 3 mana minion, so we'll say that the effect is maybe 2 mana or so, but we think if there was a spell that did this, it would probably cost more. Charge is the strongest effect in the game, as it's a combination of a minion's body and a damaging spell, if you think about it. I mean, as long as there's no taunt, and even then you do damage to the taunt. So most often you want to use charge to deal damage directly to an opponent's face, but like I said, you can use it to deal damage to a minion. However, this does result in a bit less value. In our calculations, we take into account the maximum possible value, So 6 damage that Mr. Smite can deal to the opponent's face, it's like equivalent to a fireball. Cards with combo potential have very important features. Their maximum value is able to be scaled based on the number of additional mana crystals during a turn and other resources that you can use, like other cards and synergies and things like that.
Thus, the maximum value, for only 6 mana crystals, is 13.5 mana, which is 2.3 times more than what you spend on summoning a minion. But this is not your final value. The more mana you have and the more resources you can use per turn, the more value you will multiply. The change in the cost of the card had a significant effect on the decrease in the utility ratio. Now the indicator is 1.9. Moreover, the increase in cost has reduced the number of options for combinations.
Speaking of pirates, we can't ignore Nelly the Great Thresher. All colossal minions are summoners, but Nelly is also a resource generator card type. The death rattle mechanic has delayed activation, which is a disadvantage.
Nelly discovers 3 pirates, then reduces their costs to 1. This effect is a combination of several different mechanics. There have always been cards in Hearthstone that manipulate mana costs, but being able to change the cost of multiple cards to a cost of 1 mana with basically no effort, that's extremely rare. The first time we got an effect like this was during the Grand Tournament thanks to Aviana. However, her high cost and lack of something like Taunt or like an immediate presence made the legendary card very useless. Among classic cards, there is one interesting card that has a similar effect. Summoning Portal made cards cheaper by 2 mana, but they couldn't go under 1. However, we still think Nelly's effect is a lot better, since you have a chance to make super expensive pirates really cheap. Therefore, we decided to assign a value of 4 mana to this effect.
It is extremely difficult to accurately assess this effect. Most likely it should be based on the total discount of mana crystals. In addition, Nelly applies 3 discover effects. In classic Hearthstone, the only card with this effect was tracking. Of course, the ability to discover a card from a deck and the ability to discover a card from a certain pool of cards are different effects that will be useful in different circumstances, but I believe that their value is about the same.
Thus, for 7 mana, you get a benefit of 21.5 mana crystals but in a delayed time frame. Moreover, even this result was not the maximum possible value, but rather the average. If you are lucky enough to find Mr. Smite, your value will be way beyond these calculations.
After the nerf, the utility ratio became more predictable and more balanced, since the maximum discount for minions is only 3 mana. This effect is very similar to the classic Sorcerer's Apprentice card.
Next on the list is Cartridge Demon Render. This hero card, like Drekthar and Mr. Smite, has combo potential, which means the more mana you have to use other resources, the more benefits you get from the card. In addition, he also serves as a board clear. Furthermore, another special feature of the card is gaining permanent improvements for yourself, as your hero power receives a significant buff. For 6 mana, Cartridge summons 2 minions that can immediately deal damage. Minions with Rush are both a body and also are kind of like spells because they deal damage to minions. If your minion kills an opponent's minion and survives, you get even more value. If it dies, then it's basically like using a spell. In these calculations, to make it fair, we represented 1 minion as a body and the second as a Shadow Bolt spell.
Cartridge also gives you 5 armor. An analog of this effect can be considered Shield Block for 2 mana. In addition, the card also improves your hero power ability similar to Shadow Form in Classic, and activates the Auctionmaster Beardo permanent effect, which we estimated at 4 mana. Thus, using this card on turn 6, even without using the combo potential, your benefit ratio will be 3.2. This is an extremely high score.
A few words about the new card. Neptulan the Tidehunter is both a summoner and a board clearer. The effect is immediate and is a potentially long-term action.
In other words, if the opponent does not take urgent action, you will receive additional benefits on following turns.
First, you summon 2 arms that are equivalent to a classic minion worth 3 mana each. Then, you apply long-term immunity to these minions. This effect is very similar to the classic spell Bestial Wrath. Since Neptulan has Rush and Wind Fury, you can also deal damage to 2 enemy minions at once. This component of the effect is equivalent to casting 2 Flameland spells for 5 mana. As a result, the utility ratio of the card is 3.4, so you get 3.4 times the value of the actual mana cost of the card.
To be honest, I am extremely saddened by this effect, since Neptulan is an almost identical copy of raid boss Onyxia. Looks like the developers are running out of ideas.
Onyxia's costs and effects are essentially the same, even though there are some differences. The main difference is that the summoned minions are short-lived. As we said, minions with Rush are both minions and limited spells in a way, so let's imagine that 3 of these whelps survive and 3 die. This would be equivalent to casting 3 copies of Murloc Raider, while also casting 3 copies of a small damaging spell for 1 mana each. Onyxia, in turn, takes on the effect of a potentially long-lasting immunity and also deals 8 damage, which is the equivalent of Flame Lance.
The difference between these two cards in terms of value is the fact that Onyxia is able to deal 20 damage to the opponent's table per turn, losing all summoned minions, while Neptulan can deal 16 damage to 2 targets, but at the same time he saves his hands, which makes this card potentially more powerful. In addition, the Windfury effect creates additional value for the card. Also, the Colossal keyword allows some strategies to summon 3 creatures at once with non-standard methods. As a result, we got a stronger version of Onyxia, at least in terms of summing up the effects.
According to these calculations, the effect of Neptulan is more beneficial. But such a great similarity makes us think that the developers use a hidden benchmark for the interaction of effects.
And the last card for today is Kazukusen, which has a special place on our list. This legendary dragon is a deck improver. The effect features special application rules and a delayed benefit.
The difficulty with evaluating such cards is that your value will depend on the number of cards that you can draw and use after the effect is activated.
The transformation effect is somewhat similar to the legendary Deck of Lunacy spell, but the main advantage here is that you can discover 5 cards from a pool of very powerful treasures, which you will benefit from later on. This effect component is very similar to the new dredge mechanic in that you don't get a card in your hand after you discover it, but you put it on top of your deck. Even though the dredge effect costs basically 0 mana, we gave Kazakhstan an additional 6 mana crystals for stacking effects, which is very, very good.
Thus, the maximum possible utility ratio is 2.3, but you will get additional value with each successive turn.
That's all for today.
What do you think of our card evaluation method?
We can't wait to hear your guys' impressions and suggestions.
We would like to express our gratitude to our rare and epic patrons.
Dear friends, your support helps us to stay afloat during this difficult time.
Thank you for being with us, and I really hope that I did a good job of my first video ever for you guys. I know I've been working in the background for a while, so I'm just super excited to be here, so go easy on me.
We hope to be able to get in touch in the future.
Take care of yourself and good luck.
Job's done.